When Jenna Cole walked into the abandoned shack with her daughter and their dog, she wasn't hoping for a miracle, just a roof that didn't leak. But what they found beneath the rotten floorboards wasn't mold or decay. It was a set of iron doors, sealed shut, hiding something forgotten by time. What started as desperation for shelter became a discovery that would unearth secrets, spark hope, and change their lives forever. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories about strength, survival, and second chances speak to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story might just change your life too. The sky above the highway had gone from pale to bruised by the time Jenna Cole pulled her aging hatchback to the end of the gravel road. Willa, just 7 and impossibly quiet for her age, clutched a worn-out stuffed rabbit in one hand and Moose's leash in the other. The golden retriever panted lightly in the back seat, tail thumping with naive optimism. Jenna didn't say much. She didn't have to. The silence had already said enough. The kind of silence that grows when you've run out of options, explanations, and places to sleep. The shack came into view like a ghost from the woods, hunched, rotting, half swallowed by vines and time. A Craigslist post had mentioned it only briefly. Unclaimed rural property, structure unfit for habitation. Inquire if desperate. Jenna had stared at the last line longer than she should have. If desperate. She shut the car door gently so it wouldn't wake whatever animals might be living in the walls. Willa followed, small hand curled in Jenna's like a question she hadn't learned how to ask. The front door hung open on one hinge, like it had grown tired of resisting. Inside was darker than expected, smelled like earth, damp wood, and old stories that didn't end well. A single beam of light broke through a cracked panel in the roof, and dust swirled inside it like forgotten breath. Jenna crouched and ran her hand across the floorboards. Soft in places, brittle in others. No insulation, no plumbing. But it was shelter. Sort of. We can live here, she whispered more to herself than to Willa. Moose sniffed along the corners, alert. His tail went still as he reached a patch near the center of the floor, then lowered his snout and whined. That night, they huddled in sleeping bags on a patch of dry wood in the corner. Jenna wrapped her arms around her daughter and stared through a hole in the ceiling where a few stars still dared to shine. Her breath was shallow. Her mind raced with every bad decision, every moment she should have seen coming. But all she could do now was survive this night, and the next. One at a time. Willa finally spoke. Is it okay that it creaks? Jenna kissed the top of her head and nodded. Creaking means it's still standing. Moose lay by the door, ears twitching at every sound. Outside, the wind carried the sounds of the forest, a low rustling, a far-off owl, the shifting of unseen branches. Inside, it was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. And Jenna, for the first time in weeks, let herself believe maybe, just maybe, they'd landed somewhere they could stop running. Even if just for one night. The wind grew meaner after midnight. It howled through the cracks in the wall, sending cold air slithering across their blankets like fingers looking for warmth to steal. Jenna stayed awake long after Willa's breathing slowed. She counted the seconds between each gust, trying to measure how broken the walls really were, how far they might fall if pushed. Moose never settled. Every time Jenna closed her eyes, she'd hear the soft pad of his paws across the splintered floor. His claws clicked, paused, clicked again like he was trying to tell her something. She shifted her weight. The floor groaned beneath her, and something about the sound made her flinch. Not fear, just memory. The echo reminded her of the final night in their apartment. The last notice on the door. The tight smile from the property manager who didn't want to be cruel. Just done. Willa rolled closer in her sleep, murmuring nonsense, one hand gripping Jenna's arm tight even in dreams. Jenna looked down at her and felt a slow ache in her chest, not from pain, but pressure. The kind that comes from holding everything in for too long. You deserve better than this, she whispered, voice catching. She scanned the room again. Most of the walls still stood, though the boards had warped from years of rain and neglect. One corner of the ceiling sagged like a broken spine, but the foundation felt off. Something about the way Moose kept pacing near the center. Something about the way her footstep earlier had echoed. She stood carefully, pulling the blanket around her shoulders, and walked toward the middle of the room. Moose perked up, tail wagging once, then stilled. Jenna crouched and pressed her palm to the wood. Cold. Unusually so. She knocked gently, hollow. Her heart jumped. She looked at Moose. He stared at the same spot, ears forward. "Is there something under there?" she murmured. No reply, of course. Just the wind. She stood, made a mental note, and returned to Willa's side. The storm was passing. The trees no longer groaned. Even the stars had come back, peeking through the holes like shy witnesses. Jenna let her eyes close. Just for an hour. Just to feel less like a ghost herself. But even in the shallow sleep that followed, her dreams circled the same sound, the echo beneath her feet, the quiet insistence of something waiting just below, and the sudden, unshakable sense that this broken shack was hiding something no one had seen in a very long time. By morning, the rain had passed, leaving the world outside smelling of pine, mud, and possibility. Jenna stepped out briefly to gather firewood from the edge of the trees, more out of instinct than purpose. There wasn't a fireplace, just a rusted tin bucket they used to boil instant coffee on a camping stove. She hadn't touched caffeine in weeks, but the routine helped. It made her feel like she was still human. Willa stayed wrapped in the sleeping bag, doodling with a broken crayon on the back of an old envelope. She hummed a song Jenna didn't recognize, probably something made up, and Moose, ever vigilant, kept circling that same patch of floor. "Moose," Jenna said softly, wiping her hands on her jeans. "What's got you so interested?" The dog paused, nose pressed low, and began to scratch. Not just a curious paw swipe. This was urgent, frantic even. Claws catching splinters, legs digging with determination. Jenna hurried over, trying to stop him before he tore the floor to pieces. "Hey, stop, buddy. You're going to hurt yourself." But then she saw it. A seam. Faint, but real. A perfect, almost invisible, rectangular outline beneath the scratched boards. Jenna blinked, dropped to her knees, ran her fingers along the edges. They didn't match the rest of the wood. These weren't just old floorboards. They were covering something. She stood, grabbed the small crowbar from her trunk, part of an old roadside kit she'd almost sold 2 weeks ago for gas, and wedged it between the seams. The wood resisted, groaned, then gave way with a dry snap. She peeled back 2 planks and stared. Iron. Black. Cold. Set flush into the earth. It looked like a trapdoor, except it had no handle. Just 2 wide iron panels with hinges on one side, and a keyhole in the center, crusted with rust. "Willa," Jenna said, breath caught somewhere between panic and awe. "Come look at this." The little girl padded over, barefoot, eyes wide. "Is it treasure?" she whispered. Jenna almost laughed, the way you do when you're so tired you can't cry anymore. "I don't know, baby. But it's something." Moose lay beside them now, satisfied, tail thumping slowly. Job done. Jenna traced the keyhole again. It was oddly well preserved, as if it had waited for years not to stay locked, but to be found. That night, she couldn't sleep. The image of those doors lingered every time she closed her eyes. Her thoughts spiraled. What if it was nothing? What if it was dangerous? But more than that, what if it was important? And why, of all places, had she been the one to find it? The next morning brought a crisp breeze and sunlight that filtered through the broken roof like gold dust. Jenna couldn't stop looking at the iron doors, now fully exposed. They felt ancient, industrial, completely out of place in this falling-down cabin in the woods. She checked the keyhole again. Still rusted, still refusing to reveal its secrets. Willa sat cross-legged beside it, tapping the boards like a drum. "We need a key," she announced. "Big and old." Jenna nodded, trying to ignore how real the weight in her chest felt. She spent the better part of the morning searching. Every drawer, every rotted cabinet. She tore through a crumbling closet in the back, where an old mattress had disintegrated into dust. Nothing. Until Moose barked. She followed the sound to what used to be the kitchen, or what was left of it. Beneath the fallen shelves, something glinted. A metal box, barely visible through a lattice of cobwebs and collapsed plaster. Jenna pried it open. Inside were scraps of paper, a rusted spoon, a tiny compass, and a key. Not modern. Not like anything she'd seen before. It was long, heavy, with ornate teeth and a worn brass bow. Her breath caught as she turned it in her palm. It felt right. Back at the trapdoor, she hesitated for only a second before kneeling down. The key slid in with surprising ease. She expected resistance, a fight with time and corrosion, but instead, it turned with a deep, resonant click, like a note struck on a piano that hadn't played in years. Willa gasped. Moose barked once. Then the doors creaked open. Dust and cool air spilled upward from below, curling around their faces like breath from another world. Jenna held the doors and stared down into the dark. Wooden stairs led into what looked like a room, stone-walled and still, lit by slats of filtered sunlight from a grate above. "What is it?" Willa whispered. Jenna shook her head. "I don't know." But she stepped down anyway. Each step groaned, but held. At the bottom, the temperature shifted cooler, quieter. Time seemed to hang in the air like fog. There were shelves, cabinets, a table, an old oil lamp perched in the corner, and not a speck of mold or dust. Someone had built this place to last. Jenna turned in slow circles, taking it in. It wasn't just a basement. It was something older, more intentional, and it had been waiting for them. It felt like stepping into a story that hadn't been told in decades. Jenna stood, motionless in the underground room, heart pounding louder than her footsteps. The air was thick with a scent she couldn't place, something like aged paper and firewood. Willa clung to her side, eyes wide but fearless, her small hand gripping Jenna's fingers like an anchor. "This is a secret house," Willa whispered, voice reverent. Jenna didn't correct her. Maybe it was. The walls were made of thick stone, each block stacked with the precision of a mason who cared more about purpose than polish. Wooden shelves lined one side, filled with books whose spines had faded but held their shape. A narrow writing desk stood in the corner, with a single chair tucked under it, and beside it, a lantern with a dusty glass shade. The strangest thing was how untouched. Everything seemed no cobwebs, no rodents, no sign of intrusion. Like someone had walked out one day and simply never returned. Jenna ran her fingers along the edge of the desk. Smooth, polished even. She reached for the lantern, half expecting it to fall apart. But it didn't. It was heavy. Real. She lifted the glass shade and found a wick still soaked in oil. She lit a match. The flame caught instantly, casting a warm glow across the room. Shadows danced on the stone walls, flickering like memories trying to come back to life. Willa wandered toward the mural painted on the back wall, a faded image of mountains, a stream, and what looked like a farmhouse tucked in the trees. But it was the symbol carved above it that made Jenna pause. A simple circle, intersected by 3 vertical lines and a single diagonal slash across the center. She didn't know what it meant, but it felt intentional, personal. "What is this place?" she whispered. Moose stood watch at the bottom of the stairs, not barking, not pacing, just still, guarding, as if he understood that this was no ordinary discovery. In one corner of the room, a low wooden cabinet sat flush against the stone. Jenna opened it gently and found a collection of old tools, a hammer, a folding blade, candles wrapped in wax paper, and beneath them, a tin box filled with matchsticks. Someone had lived here. Or at the very least, prepared to. Jenna exhaled slowly. Her body felt heavy, like she'd just exhaled 5 years of fear. She didn't know what this room was meant for. She didn't know who had built it. But it wasn't empty. Not really. It held a kind of presence, not ghostly, but human. A kind of quiet strength carved into the stone itself. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was squatting in someone else's broken life. She felt like she'd been invited. The journal was hidden in the drawer of the writing desk, wrapped in soft leather worn smooth by time. It was tied with a fraying cord, and when Jenna unwrapped it, the musty scent of old ink and memory spilled into the air. The first page was yellowed, ink faded but still legible. Property of Elias Dunbar, Glenford, County. The 12th of April, 1961. Jenna's fingers trembled as she turned the page. Elias wrote like a man who didn't expect anyone to read his words. The entries were quiet, thoughtful, sometimes rambling. Not a diary, not a ledger, but something in between, a record, a confession. "I built this room for peace, not for hiding." But peace is fragile, and people don't leave you alone just because you want to be forgotten. He spoke of the land, how he'd bought it after returning from war. How the house above had already started falling down when he found it. How he didn't care. He wasn't looking for luxury, he was looking for silence. Jenna turned the pages slowly, each one revealing a little more of the man's heart. I carved the emblem from my dreams. Don't know what it means, but it followed me home in nightmares until I gave it shape. Sometimes I wonder if someone will find this place when I'm gone. If they'll sit in this chair, light this lamp, breathe this still air and wonder who I was. Then came a shift. There's something deeper, I think, beneath this place. Old stones, doors in the earth. I found a hatch years ago, but never opened it. Part of me feared what I'd find. The other part feared I'd be disappointed. Jenna sat up straighter. Another hatch? She scanned the room again. No sign of it. Not yet. She flipped forward to the final entry, written in shakier handwriting. If someone's reading this, I hope you needed it. This room. This quiet. I hope you found it when the world gave you no other place to go. I've left something for you. Not treasure. Not exactly. But a way out. Or maybe a way forward. Look for the second key. Where the light finds the carving. She stared at the words, heart racing. Second key. Second door. Her eyes snapped to the symbol carved above the mural. The light from the lantern was flickering just beneath it, almost touching. Jenna stood, reached for the lantern, and angled it upward. The flame caught the carving full on. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a soft click. A panel behind the mural shifted just barely. She turned to Willa, who stared back with awe and quiet fear. Are we going in? The little girl asked. Jenna nodded. I think we have to. The panel behind the mural didn't swing open. It eased, as if letting go after years of holding its breath. Jenna stepped forward, fingers tracing the edges of the now loosened stone. It slid sideways under the pressure of her hand, revealing a shallow alcove no larger than a cupboard. Inside, nestled in a cradle of dust and linen, was another object wrapped in oilcloth. Jenna pulled it out carefully and unwrapped the layers, revealing something strange and beautiful. A brass compass fused to a cracked glass lens, mounted onto a carved wooden base with lines etched across the surface. A map. But not just any map, it was drawn not on paper but on old leather. The land was familiar yet foreign. Hills, creeks, and landmarks, she recognized in shape but not in name. A small X had been etched in the corner near the base of the drawn structure, a cabin, crudely rendered but unmistakable. Beside it, someone had written in faded ink, below the emblem, beneath the breath of stone. Jenna turned the wooden base over and found a tiny metal key taped underneath. The second key. Willa leaned over her shoulder. What does it open? I'm not sure, Jenna said, but her voice wavered with certainty. She was sure. Something deeper. Something below. Moose let out a low growl, tail still. His head turned toward the far end of the room where a narrow seam ran along the floor, a faint outline like the first iron doors, nearly hidden under a rug made brittle with age. Jenna knelt, peeled the rug back, and found it. A second hatch, made of reinforced wood and iron bands, almost ceremonial in how deliberately it had been built. There was a lock in the center. The small key slid in like it had been waiting. A deep, mechanical clunk echoed in the stone room. The hatch creaked open, revealing a set of stairs descending into darkness. Willa clutched Jenna's hand. What if it's scary down there? Jenna gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Then we face it together. She lit a second lantern and handed it to Willa, then began descending the narrow steps, Moose following silently behind. The air grew cooler, damper. The stairs led to a corridor of stone smoother than above, carefully shaped, not natural. Built. At the end of the hall was a heavy door, rounded at the top like an old cathedral arch, with a latch that stuck but gave after a sharp tug. Inside was a room unlike any they'd seen. It was wider, taller, a true underground chamber. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes sealed in wax. A large table sat in the center with maps, charts, and a dusty black radio. Everything was arranged in a way that suggested purpose, not panic, not hiding, but preparation. In the far wall, embedded in a shallow alcove, was a mural. Another one. This time, it showed a family. A mother, a child, and a dog, standing before a house. Jenna froze. It looked like them. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She stepped closer. The mural wasn't exact, but it didn't feel like coincidence. The hair, the clothes, even the shape of the dog's ears. It was like someone had painted the idea of them, or had somehow known they would come. Beneath the mural was a plaque, tarnished and nearly illegible. She scraped away the grime and read the words aloud. To the ones who come after, this was built not to hide, but to shelter. If you found it, then you were meant to. What we could not finish, perhaps you can begin. Willa stepped up beside her. What does that mean? Jenna looked around the room at the supplies, the maps, the silence heavy with hope. It means this place wasn't lost. She whispered. It was waiting. Jenna spent the next hour exploring the chamber like someone inside a dream they didn't want to wake from. Every shelf, every crate, every sealed jar was carefully labeled in handwriting that had thinned over time. There were canned goods, tools, rope, flashlights wrapped in waxed cloth. And not a speck of rot or mold anywhere. The room was dry, perfectly preserved. A miracle of time and intention. Moose curled up in the corner like he belonged there. Willa sat at the central table flipping through a book of pressed flowers someone had taken the care to preserve, each page a delicate window into a past, too patient to die. On one wall, Jenna found a locked metal box bolted into the stone. It looked military heavy, fireproof, and aged. She tried the small key again. It didn't fit. But beside it was a combination dial, and taped to the wall above was a torn scrap of paper with 4 digits written in faded ink. 1939. She turned the dial, slowly, hands trembling not from fear, but the weight of possibility. The box clicked open. Inside were 3 things: a cloth pouch filled with silver coins, a folder stamped with U.S. savings bonds, and a stack of letters tied with blue ribbon. She lifted the letters first. The top one had no envelope, just a single line across the top. For the next mother who needs a way out. Jenna's breath caught. The letter was long, handwritten in looping script. A woman named Marion Dunbar, presumably Elias's wife or daughter, wrote of hard winters, of fear, of hope. She wrote about how the world seemed to forget people like them, how she and her family built the underground space as a fallback when things got too loud above. If you're reading this, you probably needed quiet more than answers. I don't know your story, but I trust it's hard. I trust you're tired. That you've been told to be grateful for scraps and silence. I'm here to say, no more. You deserve safety. You deserve a future. Jenna wiped tears from her cheek, the paper crinkling in her grip. She looked at Willa, still reading quietly, lips moving with some word she didn't say aloud. Then she looked at Moose, his chin resting on his paws, content. Everything she'd been running from, the missed rent, the cold nights in the car, the stairs, the shame, it all felt distant now. Not gone, but held at bay by something older and stronger. This place had been built not with fear, but with love, a kind of hope handed down like a torch. And now, it was hers. She gathered the pouch, the folder, and the letters, and brought them upstairs. As she stepped back into the first underground room, the air warmer now from the lanterns, she whispered aloud to the stillness. Thank you, whoever you were. You saved us. And in the silence that followed, Jenna swore she heard the room breathe back. The bonds were real. 6 slips of thick, government, stamped paper sat neatly inside. The folder, aged and yellowed at the corners but still valid. Still bearing value, untouched for over 50 years. Jenna read and reread the numbers, doing the math in her head with the disbelief of someone who'd never even had a savings account. Over $40,000. Not millions, but more than enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to fix the roof. Enough to start something that belonged to her. She stared at the bonds for a long time, the numbers blurring through her tears. After months of scraping together change, eating instant oats with Willa for dinner, charging her phone at gas stations, she'd found a door in the ground, and behind it, a door to something else entirely. Freedom. Not the kind you shout about. The kind you feel when no one is watching, when the weight lifts off your chest for the first time in years. That afternoon, Jenna walked the edge of the property, map in hand. The crude sketch on the leather had more meaning now. Trails, streams, even what looked like a well house marked near the tree line. She found it overgrown and sunken, but real. Everything was real. And everything had been waiting. Back inside the cabin, Willa was taping her drawings to the stone walls of the study. Little stick figure people with dogs and sunshines, and something she labeled, "Our new house." Jenna stood in the doorway, hands dirty from clearing brush, and felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Pride. Not in the money, not even in the finding of it, but in the staying, in the not giving up. That night, they sat on the floor of the underground room eating soup heated over the lantern, Moose curled at their feet. Jenna read the second letter aloud, another one from Marion. "If you choose to stay, this place is yours. No deed, no bank, no law ever came back for it. We tried to register the land once, but no one cared. No one wanted it. That was their mistake. This place isn't worthless. It's waiting. For someone brave. For someone kind. For you." Jenna folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. She didn't need permission. She just needed to say yes. The next morning, she did. She called the local supply yard. She haggled. She traded labor for lumber. She met a retired handyman named Elgin at the town diner who said he'd help reinforce the roof just for the company and a hot lunch. Word spread quietly, kindly. No press. No spectacle. Just neighbors. People who didn't ask too many questions, only what tools she had and where to start. And so, with calloused hands and a full heart, Jenna began to rebuild the little shack. Not from desperation, from choice. By the end of spring, the roof didn't leak anymore. New beams now held where rot once whispered. The windows, once cracked and cloudy, had been replaced with salvaged glass that caught the morning light just right. Jenna had sanded every wall herself, using borrowed tools and late-night playlists, singing under her breath, while Willa fell asleep in a proper bed for the first time in a year. The underground rooms stayed untouched, preserved like a memory in stone. She lit the lanterns every night, just to remind herself it was real. She framed Marion's letters, hung Elias's journal in the study. And on the wall near the stairwell, she placed Willa's first drawing of the house with a single title scrawled beneath it, "We live here now." The story, of course, got out. Not viral. Not explosive. Just a quiet ripple across the county line. A woman down on her luck finds an old cabin, discovers a secret bunker, and makes a home out of what everyone else left behind. People started showing up, not for curiosity, for hope. Mothers with tired eyes. Veterans with soft hands and quiet voices. Teens with nowhere to be after school. They'd show up with tools, food, questions. Jenna didn't have answers, but she had space. She started a community night every Friday, potluck by lantern light. Sometimes just 5 people. Sometimes 20. Sometimes more. She called it The Below, a name borrowed from the mural, the message, the dream carved beneath the floor. And slowly, the place grew. She used the remaining money from the bonds to buy the parcel outright through a private title service. No one contested it. No one had even remembered it existed. That land, once forgotten, was now a map for the lost. Willa grew taller, happier. Her laughter came quicker now, no longer shaped by fear. Moose, still devoted, patrolled the grounds like a knight on duty. One evening, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a single note. "My grandmother was Marion Dunbar. She always believed someone would find that place. Thank you for proving her right. J.D." Jenna folded the letter and smiled. The final cracks in her chest seemed to seal right then. Months passed, then a year. The world outside kept spinning fast, but in the cabin, beneath the beams rebuilt with sweat and kindness, time slowed. It didn't stop. It settled. And Jenna, once homeless, once hopeless, became something more. A builder of second chances, a keeper of the forgotten. A mother who said, "We can live here," and made it true. And for everyone who walked through those old iron doors, breathing in the scent of oil, lamp smoke, and possibility. It wasn't just a house. It was proof that even what's buried can bloom again, if someone brave enough is willing to dig.